Hey everybody, I want to talk to you a little bit about how do you break down the results after your decisions process. How do you know whether you did the right thing or whether you did the wrong thing? So that process starts with a simple question. The simple question is this: what was your intended strategy? In other words, what did you intend to do? So for the sake of convenience and ease, I'm going to start with company I here. I'm company I, if you'll recall, and also company J. But in company I, my intent was to run the cost leadership strategy. Okay. You'll remember if you go back and watch the videos, the decisions that I made, all of them for implementing the cost leadership strategy relate to company I. So the question is, what was my intended strategy? To find out whether you were actually successful in achieving your desired strategic position, you need to look at the Camera and Drone Journal, and you'll want to look at the action capture camera benchmarks first, and then the UAV drone benchmarks. So the action capture camera benchmarks give you, in the left-hand column up top, the low-cost producer for the camera. In the third column, it gives you the high-cost producer for the camera. In the middle column, it gives you the average cost producer for the camera. And then in the fourth column, it will give you your results. So you see, I am company I, and my strategy, my intended strategy, was cost leadership. So you ask yourself the question, am I the cost leader in my industry? And the answer to that question is yes, I am the cost leader because my total camera production assembly cost, which is the manufacturing cost per unit, is $130.49. And if you match that to the left-hand column, you see that the low-cost producer was $130.49. So that had to be me. Okay. Now, down below that, you'll see some geographic operating benchmarks, which gives you your operating profit margins, operating profit numbers. It tells you delivery cost and marketing cost and gives you operating profit. But it gives you that for all four of your geographic areas so that you can then benchmark those numbers against the industry. So I had a 21.9% operating profit margin in North America, and an 18.3% in Europe, Africa, and a 17.1% in Asia Pacific, and a 19.2% in Latin America. So comparing those to the industry averages, I'm above average in all four geographic markets, and I actually had the highest operating profit margin in Latin America. Therefore, I should have had a pretty good outcome. Let me look at the drone real quickly. So if I look at the drone, again, the same thing applies. You have the assembly and production benchmarks. Left-hand column is going to be the low-cost producer. The second column is average. The third column is the high-cost producer. And then the fourth column is your company. So looking at my company, my total drone production and assembly cost is $677.55. Match that to the far left-hand column. And indeed, I was the low-cost producer. While I'm here, I also want to take a look at the operating benchmarks. So I was the highest operating profit margin in North America. I was the highest operating profit margin in Europe, Africa, was the highest operating profit margin in Asia Pacific, and I was well above average, but not the highest in Latin America. So taking a look at that, I should have done pretty well. I should have had a pretty good outcome. So let's go to the scoreboard. So we've asked the question, what was your intended strategy? We've answered the question by saying, we'll put a big check mark by that because I was the low-cost producer. I achieved my intended strategy. So the next question that you want to ask is, did I achieve my desired outcome? So if you take a look at the scoreboard, it tells you where your company ranks relative to other companies within the industry. And it shows you very clearly that company I is the second place company, right? Why is that company in second place? If I had all of these great outcomes and had these great operating profit margins, why didn't I have a better outcome than that? Why did company J finish ahead of me? And to answer that question, you've got to go a little bit deeper because cost leadership is about having the lowest cost in the industry, but you also have to be a high volume producer. You've got to have the most market share in the industry. And you will learn that information if you take a look at the comparative competitive efforts. You can also look at the regional average comparative efforts if you wanted to. But at the comparative competitive efforts, what you'll see is that company I, in terms of market share, had 9.4% market share. That's lower than expected. That's for North America. For Europe, Africa, I had 9.8% market share. For Asia Pacific, I had above average market share at 10.9%. And then in Latin America, I had above average market share at 10.4%. So I had two markets with above average market share, but I had two markets with below average market share. And so I didn't achieve my desired goal of being the market leader. Taking a look at the drone in Latin America, I was very clearly the market leader on the drone in Latin America. In Asia Pacific, I was the market leader on the drone. In Europe, Africa, I was the market leader on the drone. I'm basing that on the fact that I've got the most market share, y'all, in case that's not clear. And then in North America, I was also the market leader. So on the drone, I was the cost leader and the market leader. But on the camera, I didn't achieve the market leader position in two of the four geographic markets. So the question becomes, okay, what the heck happened? Taking a look at these comparative competitive efforts, the reality is that I just got undercut on price. I only dropped my price by $2. If you'll recall, I saved about 25 bucks in my manufacturing cost, but I only passed about $2 of that along to my consumer. You see where company H came in and they undercut me on price by going to $220 for a 4.1 star product. So if a customer is comparing these two products, side by side, usually they're going to go with the one that offers the better value, which in this case would clearly be company H. You can also look at company B. They're pretty clearly offering a better value with a 4.7 star product. And then company F with a 4.2 star product at $225. You've got them offering a better product. And here's the big one for you. Company E at 5.5 stars didn't increase their price. So as a result, they had stockouts in North America, Europe, Africa, Asia Pacific, and in Latin America. They had product that customers wanted to buy, but was not available. So the reality is we were all competitive on price for the most part, but I just got outmaneuvered and undercut on price. Okay? That affects your operations. And now we get to the heart of why we didn't do well. So if I take a look at assembly and facility operation, that's in your company operating reports, you see that I had 360 workstations installed in my camera facility and 150 installed in my drone facility. Of those 360 workstations in the camera facility, I only used 284 of those. Now, 284 divided by 360 is going to be a pretty abysmal number. If I do the math on that, it shows me that I only did 78.8% of capacity. So I had 22% of my factory, almost 22% of my factory sitting idle. Over in the drone facility, I had roughly 10% of the factory sitting idle. So it's really hard to perform well, particularly when you're running a cost leadership strategy, if you're not using all of your factory. So that's the problem. It came down to market share, and it came down to the fact that I wasn't using all of my facility. That created problems because if you'll take a look at the Camera and Drone Journal, back to bonus point awards, you'll see that I did not achieve my expected revenue. I missed my expected revenue by 15.8%. So that's pretty bad. I missed my expected earnings per share by 42.1%, right? I missed my image rating by 6 points. Now, this information is important because if your company meets their projections within plus or minus 5%, earnings per share within plus or minus 5%, and image rating within plus or minus 4 points, then you get what's called a bullseye award. That's an extra bonus point that sticks with you for the duration of the competition, right? And then you can also win what's called a leapfrog award, but I'll tell you more about that later. So finally, just to take a look and put a finer point on things, you can take a look at financial statistics. If you go down here to the balance sheet, you see that I had $0 in ending cash. I had projected to have about $10, $12 million in ending cash, and I missed my projections so badly that I wound up actually with a negative cash balance. And the zero is because I had to take an overdraft loan at 7.5% interest just to cover my cash shortfall. So that affected down here at the bottom, it affected my current ratio. It affected my interest coverage ratio. It affected my debt to equity ratio. All of those things are worse than we had expected them to be. Okay. I still did pretty well in the grand scheme of things. This goes back to what I told you about there being a lot of slack in the industry, right? My earnings per share was well above the investors' expectations. In Company I, it was the second highest in the industry. My return on equity was the second highest in the industry. My stock price was the second highest in the industry. My credit rating met the investors' expectations, and my image rating was the best in the industry. So I did pretty well all in the grand scheme of things, but not meeting those market share projections really hurt me because that made my factory sit idle. And that's the reason that I didn't accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. Okay. So that's breaking down for one company that did not achieve its desired outcome, even though it achieved its desired strategy. Okay. This is all about breaking down the outcomes. The question that you have to ask yourself now is, what the heck am I going to do with that? Right? I've got this information and I was clearly the cost leader. So what am I going to do to become the market leader? If I want to fix this outcome and put my company at the top of the leaderboard, I have to fix the problem of me not being the market leader. Hope this helps. You guys have a good day.